Okay, welcome everybody to Thursdays with Franco, where we talk about what's possible with Oracle Autonomous and Apex. Stuart, I know we were just talking about what was happening last weekend with Formula One. Do you want to just do a quick recap of what you showed last week?
Yeah, sure. What we did is we built an F1 simulator that we could demonstrate to customers so they could have a bit of fun on the simulator as a equivalent of the PlayStation, or it was running on PC. But we gathered all the data, threw it into Autonomous using REST APIs, and then we did some Apex dashboards just to show people about their fastest lap times. And we created a bit of competition out of it. And as I said to a lot of our guys, don't underestimate the power of competition. It was fantastic. But using the data just to showcase to people, how did they do? We also had an esports driver who set a very fast time. So we were trying to get people to compare themselves to those lap times. And we actually did have some help with the analytics on that one as well, which was pretty cool, just to tell the story.
And that's a great segue into our special guest today, who I think will become more of a regular guest, and that's Darryn Hinett, one of our analytics leads here in Australia and New Zealand. Hey, Darryn, how are you?
Very good, Franco. Thanks for having me on board. It's great to interact with the rest of the people on the call today.
So, Darryn, I know you actually played a significant role with Stuart last week. You didn't win a Guernsey to go to Melbourne,
I didn't.
No, you didn't. And I think Stuart had the honeymoon suite all to himself in Melbourne. So Darryn, do you want to talk a little bit about what you did last week with Oracle Analytics, and then we can talk more about it through the call?
Sure. So let me just share my screen here.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Stop sharing yours. Okay. All right. So yeah, Stu sent me a task of, here's some data. I've dumped it into the Autonomous database. See if you can get something funky coming out from an analytics perspective. We've seen over the last couple of sessions been running here, the focus has really been around that Autonomous database, Apex. So Stu showed you last week all of the nice visualizations and the various different components that you go through. What I'm introducing here is a new product. It's called Oracle Analytics Cloud, still part of the cloud suite. Comes in a couple of different flavors. So there's a cloud version. We do have an on-prem version, Oracle Analytics Server. It's released a lot least frequently, but it's a customer managed rather than Oracle managed, which is, OAC is like the Autonomous database. It's automated, it's patched by Oracle, it's maintained, it's always upgraded by Oracle. So Stu said, here's some data, see if you can create something that looks really funky. So, a day and a bit, we went through and built a little dashboard, and you can see here, so video game analytics. So we're taking the feeds of the data that were coming from the game console that were landing in some tables, and we built a couple of visualizations. So I'm just in sort of a view mode in Oracle Analytics Cloud at the moment. So sort of the title page. And then we actually went through and actually showed the actual game players, the track that they were running on. So at Albert Park, for any of them knows anything a little bit about the way F1 runs, it breaks into 3 sectors. The way the game works, you're not really competing against other players in a race. It's really just who can do the fastest lap. So we were starting to track and see who could actually go through and actually run that fastest lap. And then we ran a number of sessions. So this was a session that was running on, Stu, I think it was Friday morning, where we actually had a whole bunch
That's
of people
Friday lunchtime, yeah. So we've anonymized the data, by the way. That's why they're all numbers.
Yeah, so the numbers down the side here are the various different players, but on the day they could actually see their individual name, who was racing, and compare it to other players. So we've done some conditional formatting. So Stu tells me if you're doing a really good race in the actual game itself, you should be hitting just under the 85-second mark. Now you can see one person here. You can see at the top there, the fastest lap time, the average speed, 82 seconds. And as Stu said, that was that EA Sports. He blew it away compared to any other person. We only had, 4 or 5 people could actually get under that 85-second mark, and everybody was, 90 seconds and above. So yeah, we went through and actually tracked. Stu, I think actually that might be you. I think you were third. If I looked at the data when we actually had the names exposed. So yeah,
Thanks for saying
you
that.
did a fairly
It was
good
me.
tracking
I,
as we went through.
I,
But
I
we were
hope
tracking.
I hope he was up there somewhere, because he didn't get very much work done last week.
Yeah, we tracked sort of, the number of people. The other thing we tried to tie together, and if you look at that number, it's actually the same number as this, so it's the same person. So yeah, we found as people played more games, they got better. So there's a sort of correlation between the number of times they ran the race compared to where they could get in that ranking perspective as well. The next thing they were really interested was their sort of individual performance. So this is again that EA Sports driver that we actually just showing the data for. So it compares, in their case, if I took another driver, my race gives me the total lap time and then the breakdown by the 3 sectors we talked about on that image that we showed up front. And it will actually then compare that to the best driver who was at EA Sports. We use some of the spatial information to kind of overlay. So the starting point is around about here. And then we actually had, from the data, if I hover over any of these, we had the telemetry coming from the actual game itself. So you can see the speed at that particular time, the RPM, where they are on the actual track itself. And if the sort of speed, the color here, you can see the darker, that's where you're going faster. So typically you can see on the straights a lot faster than, and it sort of goes a little bit lighter on these sharp corners so that they're slowing down to go down those. But you could then compare your race to the other one. Now, interesting, one thing I did pick up, and if I made this Stu to compare to here, the average speed here was 197 for the EA Sports for the total thing, but his best time was 82 for that speed. I think Stu, your average speed was about 210, and you were about 3 seconds slower overall. So yeah, you went faster. So it's more about control than just pedal to the metal to be able to actually go and navigate the course in a reasonable time.
And we used that story a lot over the weekend after you pointed that out. So it actually made it didn't make a difference to the lap times, but it certainly made a difference to the way people were driving. So that little insights like that. I mean, I just want to highlight firstly that I really only gave Darren the data, I think Monday or Tuesday last week, and we Darren came up with this pretty quickly, and to be able to derive insights during the session was actually quite neat. So being able to tell people that top speed is not everything was actually pretty cool.
So this is a great example of what's possible with our Oracle Analytics Cloud server, dealing with data that's sitting in autonomous. So let's pivot from talking about Formula One to now talking about what's possible with Oracle Analytics more broadly, Darren.
Fantastic. Yeah, I thought a good segue here is a nice way to get familiar with Oracle Analytics Cloud is to use what we call our public library. So we expose this, and you can see here, and we'll hop in here. There's actually live demo environment. You can actually run your own components. We've got examples that you can download into your own. So as I said, Oracle Analytics comes in 3 main flavors, or 4 actually. So Oracle Analytics Cloud, which we're using today, the cloud version, Oracle Analytics Server, the on-prem. Oracle Analytics Cloud's released around every 2 to 3 months, so it's continually upgraded. And as I said, it's a Oracle managed automated service. So we do all the patching, maintaining, you're always on the latest version. Oracle Analytics Server, the on-prem version, only is released once a year, so it's always playing catch up. We do have in our Oracle Cloud infrastructure something called Marketplace. So you can host third-party applications. In there, you can actually run Oracle Analytics Server as well. So if you want to actually have full control, maintain it, decide when it's patched, you can still run Oracle Analytics Server in the Oracle Cloud infrastructure as a Marketplace image. So you just go and pick the image, it'll auto-deploy, but that becomes your responsibility to maintain, to patch, and keep going with the actual product itself. There's another suite of products we use these capabilities called Fusion Analytics Warehouse. So this is for our software as a service application. So ERP cloud, HCM cloud, procurement cloud. We've built out these pre-built mechanisms where we extract the data out of those SaaS applications into a autonomous data warehouse. So you've got all that pre-built metadata. You can extend it. You can bring in your own data sets. And then there's pre-built KPIs, dashboards, reports, and you can actually go off and actually build your own on the data sets as well. Worth mentioning here, there is a product called Oracle Analytics Desktop as well. So if you just search for that, you can actually go off and actually download that. It runs on Windows or Mac. And then basically all the demo content that I'm showing you today, you'll be able to actually run in an environment. So you can download it, play with it. It's offline, it'll run on your local machine. And that's kept in sync with the cloud version. So anything you build in that desktop version, if you wanted to, you could actually then upload it into the cloud as well. Server, Oracle and Server, as I said, only a yearly cadence release. So you might be building stuff with newer features that are not compatible. So it's more designed for those who want to actually play offline or actually create content and then load it up into the cloud. But as I said, a good segue is this analytics library. And I'll actually just post the link in the chat.
I've just done that, Darren.
You've done that? Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And there's a quick question for you, Darren.
Sure.
It's actually worth having a look. This is from Prateek Tala. Can we run Oracle Analytics Server on-prem on OCI?
So you could. So we've got obviously, our cloud machine components that you'd have to go through. I haven't actually tried that, Prateek, but certainly, that's something worth investigating further to be able to actually go through. We've obviously chatted before, so I'll take that one offline and come back to you on shortly on how we may be able to run that one.
Obviously, Prateek, we'd really like you to try Oracle Analytics Cloud, which actually simplifies the whole process. Anyway, back to you, Darren. Let's see what you can show us.
Yeah, so I'm just going to hop through a couple of things here. So first one is this product video. So if I open that in a new link, all right, we have a link to, and we host these on YouTube. So you can see here recent new features. As I said, Oracle Analytics Cloud, we had a January release, we had a March release, we're expecting one in May. We used to have a naming convention. So January would have been the 6.4, last October was 6.3, March would have been 6.5. We've actually changed that. So those people are used to looking at what version they're running. We now actually tie it back to the date. So there's the latest version of Analytics Cloud is the March 2022. The latest version of Oracle Analytics Server, because that's also just been released, is again March 2022. But we're expecting a May 2022 OAC in the May timeframe. So recent new features, we'll go through those. And then there's all different visual way of videos to actually help you use the tool itself. So connecting to your data, visualizations. There's a mobile you can download for both Android and Apple. Preparing your data calculation. So making it really easy for you to actually learn the product. If I just dive into this recent new features, one of the things you can do is subscribe to this channel on YouTube. And you can see here, I've just mentioned, so Oracle Analytics Server 2022 release has just come out. So there's a video on all the new features and functions that it's uptake from the OAC release as well. The other one I wanted to highlight, if we scroll down a little bit down here, is this Oracle Analytics Live. So on a monthly basis, product management run a webinar, which is called Oracle Analytics Live. They highlight new features, what's coming, what's available, etc. There's actually one running tomorrow our time. I know it's a public holiday, but if I go ahead and if I just give that URL, if anybody wants it, but the replays you can see are on that if you just go off and actually subscribe. And I'll just add this one to the chat quickly. And you can see there they run on a monthly basis, so you can actually go through. But I find our time zone in APAC not necessarily that friendly, so I tend to go back and watch the replay. They post it really quickly, so you can actually pick those up as you go through. All right, and the other one is the playlist for what's coming, what's new. So if I just open this one here, you can see here we've got the March release I talked about. So if you can look at that particular playlist, and you can see the January release, plus then exploring various. So this is aggregated into, looking at some of those capabilities. Bit of a teaser, in the January release, we actually pushed out a functionality called Auto Insights. So I'll keep that for an upcoming Thursdays with Franco to be able to demo some of those, but it allows you to just take any data set, load it into Oracle Analytics, and on the fly, it'll actually introspect all that data and create visualizations that it thinks are relevant on the data. So we use some machine learning capabilities to build out those. And then it's just, I want that visualization, and you can even go off and actually drag them onto your palette and start maintaining and building and extending those as you go through. So a bit of a teaser, we can show that one as we come up in a different area. So that was number one on that page. Number two, the product is extensible. So if I go into these extensions, you can actually go to the library and download a whole bunch of extensions that have been built by Oracle or by third-party partners out there. And you can actually go and add these into the actual product to be able to go and actually get those visualizations coming through. I'm going to demo some of these. So you're going to actually see this classical tree one coming through in the visualization I'm going to show you shortly. But you can see here we've added, different types of visualizations. Now, this is done through a software development kit, which is available with the product. A lot of people use, for those who may be aware, there's this thing called D3J. So it's a library of JavaScript visualizations, and you take those visualizations and then you wire them to the actual different interactivities that you need from an Oracle Analytics perspective. So you're driving what fields on there, what are hierarchies, what are parameters, etc. It's a simple mechanism to go actually build those. But these are just import into the application. You need to have an admin function to do that, but then anybody can actually use these visualizations and extend those. So that's extending the different types of visualizations. The other one is geographic. So, we do support spatial information in analytics, and that could be coming from things like the spatial functionality that's in Autonomous Data Warehouse, or you can upload GeoJSON spatial images. We're extending this out to be able to, and we use a map box to actually render these images. So very quick to be able to drill into the actual spatial data and interact with it. So you get that nice clear zoom functionality as you're using the actual product itself. The other key thing to highlight here is spatial information doesn't have to be just a map that you think of traditionally. Here's an example of an arena. So we're looking at seating capacity in those. We've done demos as an example for hospitals and universities. So hospital, let's actually analyze the foot traffic during the day. So your emergency tends to be really busy at night compared to during the day, where we might have general medicine and people going to those because they've got set appointments, and you can actually monitor that. Or bed utilization, which wards are highly utilized, and we can color code those. Example here of a metro, so this is Washington DC, and actually analyzing the traffic on the actual various different lines that you have in the area. So and then lastly, sort of a floor map. So this might be that example I gave with the hospital. It could be looking at a warehouse and tracking how much content we're storing in different areas as it moves in and out, which ones are at capacity, where we've got spare space to be able to store additional items. So spatial is not just about maps per se, but it could be representations. The other way we do it from a not really spatial, and I'll demo this, is you can actually upload any image and then use that as a background, almost like a spatial background. And I'm going to show you an example of that where we do a cargo ship and we actually analyze all the containers. So we'll jump into some demo on that one as we go through.
Yeah, you've helped me do that in the past. We had a university common study space, and we had a floor plan, and you introduced me to using this thing called GeoJSON, where we could actually turn this polygon of what was on the floor plan into small areas. And then it was actually quite easy to create different colors and little bar charts of that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, nice and easy, and a great way to represent the data. Instead of just having a table or a chart, visually being able to see where that overlay is. The one before I jump into sort of demo mode is this developers. So often we want to actually go off and actually embed the analytics into portals, third-party applications. So classic here, I want to embed it into Apex. I want to embed it into Visual Cloud Builder. So we can actually go through and get these, and I'm just going to pop this onto the introduction page. Maybe we'll go into this in a bit more detail on another session, but there are some links here. So if you go off that page, there's some blogs on how to do this and product documentation, but it's really simple. And then it seamlessly sort of fits into that, and it's almost like you're not in Oracle Analytics. You're using an Apex application or a portal, and you've just got this embedded, but you can still interact with it and be able to utilize it, which is really cool. Right. demo mode. So I'm going to go into this public access.
So
you don't need
as you're going into this, this is a really efficient or lazy way of being able to see what's possible with Oracle Analytics Cloud with a few examples that I don't need to provision or get access. I could run this anytime I want, whether I'm in the office, in a cafe, or at home.
Correct. And it's a great way to see some of the capabilities that, we try and highlight some of the new features in here, what you can do with the product. So, instead of just starting with a blank canvas, this can sort of, give you a bit of insight to say, oh, maybe I could go down that type of analysis. So on this page, you can see I've got a search capability. Again, this is view only mode, so you cannot create any new content in here. If you spun up your own or you download the desktop, you could, and you can recreate any of these in the desktop or in Oracle Analytics Cloud as well. It's giving you all the different favorite ones. And then, this is navigating through the different workbooks themselves as we go through. So I can go through and say, right, I want to view all. And it'll actually go through and actually now look at all those. And you can see all the little stars. So these are the ones that have been set as favorites. I'm going to start with this first one. So I did mention the product Fusion Analytics Warehouse. So this is pre-built reports, dashboards for our software as a service applications. So you can see we've got content now available across 3 different products, 17 different modules, and then these tree maps at the bottom. The larger they are, the more content. So across, you can see ERP. We've got more content in ERP than we have HCM. It's been out longer. It was the first release. HCM was released next. Supply chain was released third. So less content in those different areas. If I go and actually explore those in a bit more detail, I can see for ERP, I've got 7 modules across different functional areas, and then they drill down into those different components themselves. But let's look at one of those. So these are all standard reports, dashboards, being able to see the KPIs, etc. But if I go into this explore content, I can actually now navigate across and say, if I drill into ERP and then drill into, say, accounts receivable, not sure what's coming through too clearly, but you'll see these sort of dark black areas around here. So it's actually highlighting, we call it brushing. So you can actually go and see, now, where does this particular column relate to other columns and other visualizations? So in AR, there's a metric called activity. All these adjustment ones, aging amounts, all sitting under that AR. So we've just used that sort of brushing functionality to be able to find those. Now, we've delivered this content traditionally in a spreadsheet. Now, you'd open up the spreadsheet, thousands of rows. You'd have to know what you're searching for, not necessarily very easy to use. Stu's shown us the simplicity of Apex on Autonomous, where you could load that up and build the applications. What we've done here is just giving you a newer, fresher UI to be able to then navigate through that spreadsheet data. So very quickly and easy, uploaded that and then built these visualizations. And then down at the bottom here is that one I talked about. So this is a custom plugin that we talked about on those extensions. If I expand ERP and then maybe go into AP, and I want to be able to look at maybe the invoices. So we just, this is hierarchical type data, and maybe I'm interested in the invoice amount. So the invoice amount in the spreadsheet, we actually give you the, how we calculate that. So this shows the invoice amount, excluding credit memos and debit memos by invoice type. And if we want to compare that, we've not got another metric, which is average. So this is actually telling us the calculation. So invoice amount divided by the invoice count. So a simple way to actually navigate through those. And then in the spreadsheet, we actually drill down to the business questions that can be answered by the metrics that are available. So if I use this navigation across the top here, I'm looking at ERP. I'm maybe again interested in procurement, and maybe I'm interested in spend, and it gives me, now we've got, these are the business type queries that we can answer with the metrics that we have available. So what that ties back to, and then be able to then leverage those. So took a spreadsheet and given you a nice, simple, easy way to interact from an analytics perspective to be able to then find the content that you may be wanting to use to answer business questions on a day-to-day basis.
So you're hitting a couple of birds with the one stone here. You're showing us, when you acquire something like Oracle SaaS products, ERP, HCM, etc., the sorts of analytics that comes out of the box because of what you get with Oracle Analytics and Autonomous. And you're also showing us the interface that's actually quite easy to create and what's possible for your own applications with this different types of capabilities here.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Wow. Cool. Go back to that homepage. One of the fields on here is at the top. You can see I can go and actually start searching for content. So I can look through, and if I just type, and in this case, I'm interested in looking at cargo, because I mentioned I'm going to use that cargo ship to be able to show you some of the spatial and graph analytics. When I type that in, I'm given two options. And again, a little bit of a teaser here. So if I press enter, it's going to find any existing content, workbooks, reports, dashboards, etc., that pertain to cargo. But if I use shift and enter, there's a capability in Oracle Analytics Cloud called natural language processing, natural language generation. So we can actually index the actual data, and you can start having an English conversation with the data. Say, show me the top number of ships with cargo over $1 million that are running from Australia to New Zealand. And I'll actually go through and find data that's relevant to that, and actually on the fly build reports. A bit of a teaser. I'm not going to show that today, but we can actually go through and actually search for that content and be able to do those. I'm going to use the cargo one. So, what this is doing is highlighting the capability from an analytics perspective to leverage some of the core capabilities that are in the Autonomous database. So, Autonomous database is multimodal. We've talked a little bit in detail around things like JSON support, but it also supports things like spatial data and graph data. So spatial is fairly easy to understand. We've seen some of the examples of those, and here's a good representation. We've got a world map, and what we're tracking here is this individual ship over time, the containers. So it's tracking the various different ports it's going between. What are the values of the content in the containers? So you can see most of the actual containers are going to or coming from China, because that's the darkest number. And then these are the various different countries that it's actually going through and actually moving these contents around. The graph analytics allows us to be able to analyze those vertices. So, what are the different routes that the ship may be taking in terms of the way it's actually going between these various different components, and graph allows us to be able to analyze that. So this looks fairly busy because it's looking at all the different joins between all the different ports that it's traveling between. But if I drill down into this detail, maybe I'll go and look at here. Let's look at Spain. So 30 containers actually arrived in Spain off this particular ship. And now we're looking at a little bit less data. I can drag this around. So maybe a little bit small on your screen, but there's two ports in Spain, Valencia and Algeciras, and I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, so apologies for anybody who's got a Spanish background on the call. So we're using those two ports, but we can see we're getting content or containers coming from Jeddah, from Dubai, Mumbai, Tokyo, and Port Said. And as we highlight these different components, you can see that the table on the left-hand side here has actually filtered out, because you may notice there's this little green filter on these two visualizations, which basically says for those visualizations, and apologies, let me just resize that. For those visualizations, I actually want to go through and run those with a filter. So when I click on any of those values for that particular item, it's actually going to filter back to that particular component for me as we view that. And my screen's just getting bigger and bigger, but we'll get there. Bring it back into view. There we go. So if I go back to Spain as a filter, this list on the right-hand side here is now just looking at, you can see the cities is only the two that we mentioned. So Valencia and components. And we also at the same time highlighting on this graphic. So we're kind of using the ship as a spatial background information. And you can see these greenish colors. So if I hover over one of these components, we'll actually start seeing the values for that particular container. So item 252, it's picked up in Tokyo, in Japan, and being shipped to Valencia. And it's got, the value of the container is 65,000 US dollars. We can see exactly where it is on the ship, and we can actually, so, potentially some of these on the side here, if they hit a heavy storm, they might lose containers overboard. The ones in the middle will be a little bit safer. They're probably paying a bigger premium to have those containers in these safer areas, so that you don't lose that content. But again, just showing you some of the capabilities in the tool set from a spatial and graph perspective, to be able to have a look at those. Graph is often used for things like anti-money laundering. So, looking at people, how they're interacting with each other, to use for logistics in this particular case. So there's a lot of capabilities in that from a database perspective, and we're just using a visualization layer on top of that to be able to then view that information.
That's really cool. So, the cargo analytics one, not only are we looking at data in a traditional form, you've got it against maps, you've also got it against polygon type maps, and you're also using graph and spatial in a, let's say, it probably would have taken a lot of effort if you needed to do it separately, but because autonomous and analytics has that all as part of the same toolbox, it means you can attempt to do those things and get a quick understanding, and probably more significantly richer in a faster time period.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So, and it's really, if you've got the data, it's actually really simple to build these visualizations. The hard part in any of this is typically trying to get the data into a format. And, we've been covering that in a lot of detail, that the ease of simplicity of loading data into things like autonomous database, the tools that we have in there. But once that data is there, to be able to create these visualization often just becomes a drag and drop process. So really easy to interact with the product.
So you've shown us stuff that's, let's say, commercial and, makes sense for business. Let's have a little bit of fun. What else have you got that's got a bit more fun associated with it?
Absolutely. So another one I've got in here is, we've got the history of all names given to people. Now, this is US, but it's fairly representative of the Western world in terms of the names we have. So first names given to people, and tracking their age. So how old are those people today? And you can sort of start working, if I call my child X, are they likely to live longer than if I call my child Y, which is a little bit of fun. But I'm going to dive into this into the history. So we've got the historical data over since, you can see 1910 of all the first names given to people that are still alive. Interesting to see on this view, you can see the younger people, so those born in 2010, so what, they're 11, 12 years old at the moment. We're getting a higher percentage of males born. So on average, 53.6%. So there is a slightly higher slant towards adult names. And you'll see that when the popular names, when I pop those up. But, as we've all seen and probably know, as these people age and get older, the percentage changes quite radically. So, those born in 1910, only 45% approximately are still male. So females definitely outlive us from a male perspective. Much healthier living, I'm sure. Maybe we're just too reckless and drinking too much beer, but the longevity of males is definitely declines as we get older. And then if I go, as I said, look at those actual names given to people. So at the top here, you can see my filter at the moment is the top 12 names by gender and name itself. And you can see at the bottom here, we've used a standard chart to view those. We've also used this word representation. So the larger the name shown, the more popular that particular name is. So you can see things like, James is there, 5 million people. James is the most popular name. And then, Robert, John, component. Now, don't everybody has picked up anything in that insight, but of these 12 popular names, 11 are male. So we tend to be maybe a little bit boring giving names to our sons, and maybe a little bit more exploratory in terms of the names we may be given to females. So the most popular female name here is Mary, and that's the only one that makes that top 12 list. So I'm going to make this a little bit interesting from a personal perspective. I've got 2 names on this list that are nephews of mine. So my sister's son is called James. So she picked the most popular name out there and gave it to her son. And my brother-in-law has a son called Christopher. He comes in at number 12. So, again, in that top 12. So, out of those, they might be a little bit boring. They've given them names that are given to a lot of people. What I wanted to have a look and see was...
It's amazing how they appear to be religious connotation, really, with all a lot of those names are technically Bible names.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah. So I wanted to see, in my family, where we're a little bit more creative in the names that we gave to myself, my parents gave to me, and to our two daughters. So another visualization coming here. You've seen examples of this tree map. So James, again, is that most popular. The box and whisker plot on the right-hand side here, if we just take Bruno's example. So the line in the middle is the average age of people named Bruno and that are still alive. So you can see there, coming through in the middle there. So 52 years of age at the percentile. The box itself is where 50% of the people, so between the 25% percentile and the 75%, so 50% of the people named Bruno still alive are between these age ranges. So between 30 and almost 75 is where most people are called Bruno. And then you've got the outliers. So the oldest person named Bruno here in the data, 97, and the youngest, you can see age 8 in the data set that we've got. So this is kind of how that box and whisker plot works. What I was interested in seeing is, as I said, looking at names in my family. So my parents call me Darren. For those who may have seen a TV program called Bewitched, my mother, I was born in South Africa. Most people probably would pick that accent by now, but she did spend some time in the UK. We were very late to get TV in South Africa. So she saw this Bewitched program, and the husband of the witch is called Darren. Interesting, his name is spelled with an I, so D-A-R-R-I-N. I find my spelling that my parents gave me with the Y fairly unique. I haven't run into many Darrens with a Y. So I was quite surprised when it actually popped up in the data to say, right, yeah, we've actually got history around people named Darren. So down at the bottom here, you can see, and if I scroll right across to, again, that outlier with the eldest age. So oldest age of people named Darren, 53. Interesting enough, I turned 53 in September. So, my parents, I think, were fairly innovative in giving me a name at that stage that wasn't being used by a lot of people, and certainly around the spelling itself. If I take that further and look at my daughters, so my eldest daughter is called Kyra, and again, you probably getting my South African accent there. Most people in Australia try and pronounce it Kira, but we do have. So her name we actually picked up. She was born in the year 2000, and on New Year's Eve we were watching the Olympics. In South Africa, we were watching the fireworks in Sydney, and one of the reporters' names was Kira Phillips. She pronounced it Kira, and that's where we actually found the name and picked it on that day. And that was, we only moved here in 2004, but we like the name. Now she turns 22 next month, and you can see there the oldest person. So again, maybe we were a little bit more innovative in picking her name for that we actually gave her. And my other daughter is Jenna, and Jenna is now 18. Now I would have thought Jenna would be a little bit more popular, but yeah, it's more recent than Kara is. But you can see here, the oldest person's 31, so it's been around a little bit longer. And the Q2, 22, Q1, so Jenna kind of fits there around that Q1 mark when we actually allocated that name. The last one let's take somebody who we've actually got on the panel, and let's have a look and see Franco. All right, so Franco, the oldest person in this data set named Franco, is 30. Now, I don't know Franco's actual age, but I know he's been at Oracle longer than 30 years. So his parents were really innovative in giving him the name of Franco. So yeah, thought it'd just be a little bit of fun playing with some data in a different way, using some of the visualizations and being able to find some insights that you might not have picked up in terms of what you're looking at if it was just sitting in a spreadsheet.
That's been absolutely brilliant. Darren, if you could just flick back to the dashboard where we can see the 30 plus reports people can play with, and just bring that up. Whether it's dashboard or workbooks.
I'll just do that one because that will give us, there we go.
Yeah, so thank you very much for your time today. we kicked off having a look at what you did for Stuart, who gave you some data at very short notice, and which you were able to knock up with Oracle Analytics. And just a reminder, the data that Stuart provided was in JSON format. And because the Oracle Analytics capability provides the ability to look at in a relational view at the same time, Darren was able to quickly show what was possible with Oracle Analytics. Darren also introduced, you can use Oracle Analytics Server, Oracle Analytics Cloud. You've got the Oracle Analytics Desktop that you can interact with. And then there's a few marketplace images where you can do things as well. And then Darren showed you that you've got the perfect place with what's available off the Oracle Analytics website. Basically, it's showing Oracle Analytics Cloud running on Autonomous with these 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, around about 30 plus example reports, which provide the perfect place for you to think about your own visualizations for your own organization. We'll actually wrap up Thursdays with Franco officially there.